I always make sure to remove the batteries after finishing a roll of film. I once thought that my OM4 had died because the batteries were just dead. At the end of the last video I said I had an idea for this film, and that idea was to go out and take some photos of some classic cars. The second anyone looks up this film, you get a story about it being a revival cinema film with ties back to famous Findellini films of the 1950s. Yeah, you're going to leave all that off to the side for a moment. What I got hooked on is the idea of let's take some photos of some classic cars with a classic camera with a classic film look. With that in mind, I figured I would load up the OM4 and go off to a Cars and Coffee event with some friends. So I consulted the internet oracles on what speed I should shoot this film at. Now, Ferrania themselves recommend shooting at 80 ISO to the point where this DX code is 80 ISO, but it's important to remember that Pyrocat is not a speed enhancing developer. It's basically just going to go at base ISO, and sometimes, particularly with faster films, it's actually going to lose some speed. Originally I looked at what Ferrania provides in terms of information on how to develop this film, and I find it a bit disappointing that they don't have a technical information sheet, nothing to the level of what FOMA or Ilford have. It's just a little bit disappointing. I know that they're a up and coming company, but I would have hoped to see like some densitometry figures. Anyway, loaded up the OM4 and decided to go around and take a look at shiny cars. I think I really do like this rendering of the shiny paintwork. The chrome bits I think do overexpose really easily, but that's always a consideration with any film. We're getting a lot of kind of vignetting, dark tones, nice classic grain structure with this film. It's a really dreamy, nostalgic, aspirational style. I think it's coming through very well with the lens that I'm using, which is a 24 to 40 Sun lens, which was a third-party manufacturer from way back in the day. It was a nice morning to go and have a wander around. One of the things that I absolutely did want to capture with this film was a classic Alfa Romeo. I think the classic film and Italian sports car go hand in hand. I'm loving the detail that comes out in these shots, but it really is tone. Tone is really coming through a lot. Now, one of the problems I did have was because I'm shooting at 50 ISO and the lens I have is not a fast lens at all, I was having a lot of trouble hand holding the camera. There's no shake in these photos, which is great, but that can be a problem. At such low ISO, having hand holding, you want to either have a fast lens or you might need to add in some light for these subjects. I am going to try this again in the future, but I will have to bring with me a polarizer and some filters, but that means I'll also have to bring a tripod. Down at 50 ISO, hand holding really isn't the best, and adding some filters is going to cut your light very quickly, so tripod's going to be the only way to go forward. So after a lovely morning of taking photos of cars, drinking coffee, I thought the next thing to do would be to go to a coffee shop and see if I could do some lovely kind of 1960s advertising espresso photography. But this is where the camera I had decided to emulate the classic Italian sports cars of the 1960s and fail on me. Now, failures happen with film cameras from time to time, and I have had issues with the Olympus in the past, so maybe I should have went with something else. But I thought, well, I have an OM2, I can load that up, but there is a problem with my OM2. Let me just get it. So on the OM2, we have this lever up here, and it's meant to be free running, but this is how the aperture couples to the meter. And as you can see, wherever it lands it gets stuck. And I didn't realize it at the time, And as you'll see, I've got a pretty heavy stack of polarizer and filters, so I didn't want to hand meter the situation. I figured that would be less reliable than using the internal TTL. I also remembered that this camera actually has 2 different light meters, and I was relying on the idea, which happened to be wrong, that if I got the metering wrong here, when it actually takes the photo, it meters off the film plane itself, and I figured that would probably correct things. Sadly, if we take a look at the photos, the results are pretty bad, I gotta be honest here. Because I'm so unhappy with these results, I'm not going to bother spotting them or trying to edit them too hard. The scanning software was trying real hard to stretch out the contrast curves, and overall they're just pretty muddy and not very usable. But I'm not going to hold that against the film. This is clearly not an indication of what the film could be like, comparing, one of the earlier car photos to these frankly underexposed shots. Clearly there's a world of difference here, so I'm not going to hold that against the film. I just wish I had some more examples to show you, but we'll try again a little bit later. Some of these subjects I do like and want to explore again, so they might come up later in a future video. Anyway, I decided to use this Hemanex lens, and it really was like one of the super zooms of its day. It goes from 28 to 200. I am pretty dubious on the quality of this lens as well, so we're not going to factor that into the quality of these photos either. So I think this video is going to be a bit of a short one, and part of me is really tempted to try this experiment again. But there's a couple of things that hold me back. One, getting this film is kind of a nuisance in Australia at the moment. You can buy single individual rolls. They do this film also in 120 and a bulk roll. There is no sheet film for any of their films at the moment. And I could buy another one, but it means that if I want this to be my staple film, I'm gonna have to try really hard to get a bulk roll. And currently, from Ferrania's website, they do not ship to Australia. So I'd have to ask like one of the suppliers if they could do like a special order or something for me. I don't know how successful that would be. Just on the actual quality of the film, this is not a style of film I am super into. Same with Kodak XX, I find the latitude and the rendering of the midtones just isn't quite what I'm interested in. It makes a lot of sense for its actual use in cinema, but it's not the style I'm really going for. I'm more after like a traditional black and white film. I'm very used to using like the Kentmere 100 or the Ilford FP4. That's much more the style. If we go back to the previous video that I did on Ilford Ortho 80, while it's a different style, it fitted in a lot more with what I wanted to do than how this film renders. That's not to say that this is a bad film, it's just not quite the style that I'm interested in. Speaking of Ferrania, they also make P33, which is a 160 ISO film. I would be super interested in trying this. It is another cine film, so I might not like it that much, but I think it's worthwhile trying. However, I cannot find it in stock anywhere in Australia at the moment. I know it's been very popular, but this leads me into another point. As much as I actually really like Ferrania, and I love that they're sort of one of the newcomers into film manufacturing, one of the things that they have to get right is the ability to keep their stock on shelves. There has been a lot of talk on the internet about if they're having financial troubles over there, and there's been changes in management, and I don't know all of the details. I'm sure there's other videos you can look up which will have a lot more and a lot more accurate information than what I can give you. But from a customer's perspective, the problem is I can't be sure that I can get this or any of their other products when I want them, which means I would have to buy all of the film I'm interested in big lots, which is quite expensive to do all in one hit, or ask the suppliers really nicely if they could do a special order for me, which is possible, but considering the Ferrania website itself says that they're out of stock, I'm not sure that even a distributor might be able to help me. So I don't think I'm going to revisit this particular film. If you feel like I've shortchanged it because I had the camera failure, that's fair enough. Leave me a comment down below. If enough people are interested, I might, try again. I think if you're after a particular dreamy look, I think if you want to do this kind of nostalgic object photography, I think there is a lot of opportunity. That's not quite what I'm interested in, but it does have some lovely dreamy vibes, and I think it is viable for some people. Maybe this is a special choice film for many of you out there. So I'm going to call this one another one done, and let's move on to the next film. Okay, so we did Ortho and we've also done P30. What's next? We are back to Fomapan. Alright, see you next time.